You are listening to Story Club FM, and you are with me, Wanga, bringing you the program Art History, where we dissect art, look at what art used to be, what art has become now, and how it has grown over the years. The earth without art is just eh. So let's talk about it, shall we? After we listen to the song called Music for Marcel Duschump by John Cage. we'll be talking about Marcel Duchamp, also known as one of the fathers of Dadaism. Dadaism is a type of art that rejected what art was and what they called aesthetic art or retinal art that was there to just please the eye, according to people that followed Dadaism. Paintings and perfection and art that just depicts reality as is without adding any extra things was art that was just for aesthetics. It made you feel nothing, it gave you no movement, and that's how Dadaism was born. And Marcel Duchamp is who we'll be talking about today, for his famous artwork called Fountain, which was done in 1917 and displayed at an art exhibition, the Society of Independent Artists in Grand Central, New York. It was applied to be displayed there, but it never got displayed. We'll get into that the more we get deeper into understanding who Marcel Duchamp was. So let's start with where he was born. Marcel Duchamp was born in France in 1887, and he died in 1968 at the age of 81. He's known as an artist from Dadaism as well as a chess player. Marcel was born in a family that was very traditional. They believed in spending time together, enjoyed a lot of cultural activities, and his brothers were artists as well. He had a brother that was a sculptor, a brother that was a painter, and him being who he was went in a completely different direction. He also became an artist, but not in the same sense. He believed art was to be something that made people feel, something that made people think. And art was about painting beautiful landscapes. In his childhood, he used to paint landscapes as well. He used watercolors when he went on his family holidays and painted his sister in different activities. And he painted landscapes. So he was a child of art. He was an artist from the beginning. And he believed in this art that was what he called retinal art. He was part of this art. He used to paint beautiful paintings, beautiful landscapes, things that just represented the beauty of life. But the older he got, the more he started to drift away from these ideas, just like most of us do when we learn that the world is not really what we used to think it was. When you come to terms with certain things about the world, that it's not all roses and rainbows, it's not unicorns, it's not a unicorn dancing on a rainbow, it's rather a rhino walking in the dirt. It still has the horn, but maybe it has two, and instead of a rainbow, it's mud. But similar concepts still. And when you learn those things, you learn to accept that life can be gory. Life has different sides. It's a yin and yang concept, the beauty and the ugly, the light and the dark, working together to create the masterpiece of what this life truly is. And that's what he believed in. Then he was part of the Dadaism movement, which started in the 20th century. People of the Dadaism movement believed in rejecting reason, rejecting logic, rejecting aestheticism, and rejecting a lot of things from modern society. They rejected the bourgeoisie. They were irrational. They were against war, against nationalism. They promoted radical politics, which was something very out of the ordinary for the time that they lived in. They lived in a time where everything was different. People believed in so many different things. People had to hold on to nationalism. Nationalism was the driving force then because it was during a time of World War I. The war started when everybody was trying to hold so closely to their nationalism. Everybody wanted to belong to their country. They wanted to defend their country. Their country was what they had. And the Dadaism movement people believed in the exact opposite. Country is not all you have. We don't need to attach ourselves to different places. We need to attach ourselves to different things, to attach ourselves to mundane things instead of the perfect, the beauty. The bourgeoisie could always have the beauty. The bourgeoisie could have the belief in war to say, yes, go to war, people fight for their country, but most of them were safe and sound in their spaces, safe and sound in their homes, and not necessarily being dragged to the battlefield, being killed. While the lower class, the people that made less, the working class, were now the ones leaving their lives on the battlefields, dying for these nations that would never die for them, giving yourself for a country that doesn't give itself to you, fighting to fill up the pockets of the rich, but knowing that when you go home, your pockets stay empty. And Dadaism believed that there was no logic to that, and they believed there shouldn't be logic to anything. So they were against the idea of this perfect world where you fight war and you stand for your country and everything should be beautiful, everything should be perfect. Instead, they fought that. And Marcel Duchamp's most famous artwork was the fountain. Interestingly enough, the fountain was not just a fountain. It sounds like that's what it should be. When you think of the fountain, you think of the fountains that they made for the Greek gods back then, for Greek mythology, for example. Sculptures of Cupid flying and spitting out water from his mouth, and sculptures of Aphrodite pouring water from her bucket, or Hercules standing strong and proud. Those are the things that we think of. But Marcel Duchamp's fountain was something that you would not expect. It was something out of the ordinary. He took a urinal and called it a fountain, which to some, when you think about it, could be quite insulting. You're calling a urinal a fountain. It's quite a vulgar concept. Very, in a conservative European society, that's something that's very out of the ordinary. It's something you don't usually discuss. You can't just discuss urinals or things that should be done in private or things that shouldn't be talked about, like going to the bathroom. It's something that was whispered around. You don't talk about it. We know it happens, but you don't talk about it because you respect the space of being bougie. Like the bourgeoisie people were very bougie and prim and proper, and nothing crude could be said amongst them. And art was something that was very enjoyed by the bourgeoisie back then. It still is. Art is looked at as something of a higher class, something that we regard with such awe, such poise, something that's of a higher level of life. And that is what it is. Beauty is of a higher level of life, but we all are of a higher level of life because as human beings, we experience life. All experiences allow us to be art, to be within art. And the artists of Dadaism knew that, and they saw that, and they wanted to create a space where all artists had that opportunity, had the opportunity to be prim and proper, to be, to feel like their everyday life is art, to romanticize life. Life gets a lot better when you add a little spice of delusion in there, to look at things as of extra beauty, to look at things like it's the first time you've seen them and it's definitely going to be the last time. So stay in awe of all of them. And Marcel Duchamp had his urinal displayed at this big art exhibition, and it was at the height of Dadaism, and he was a well-known artist. There was a lot of expectations from him. People expected him to display an artwork that he had been painting. There were rumors going around that he had a painting that he had been doing since he moved to New York 2 years prior to the exhibition, and everybody was looking forward to it. And when they got there, they were disappointed. But the art gallery couldn't have rejected his urinal as an artwork because it said their policies allowed every artist to have their work there and accept it as long as they pay the fee, and he had paid the fee. But what they did was they had put his artwork aside and it was never put on display. But a photographer took a picture of that artwork and posted it in a journal. A lot of people it raised a lot of issues amongst people. A lot of people wanted to say it is not art. A lot of people said it was not what art should be. It was just a urinal and that's all there was to it. But Marcel Duchamp fought to say that is what art is. Art is anything. Anything could be art. You could put your shoe and frame it nicely. It could be art. And the concept of the shoe could mean that when you look at that shoe, you're seeing all the steps it's taken, all the places it's carried an individual, and that is art. Art is all the stories that lie behind the mundane situations, the mundane things that we see every day, the things that we think are light, the things that we like, yeah, okay. Those are the things that hold the art together, and that's what Marcel Duchamp tried to put across. He put all these ideas of what he believed in and let them tell the story of what art should be. But before I carry on discussing this art, this irrational art, this art that's so out of the ordinary, let's listen to an interview of Marcel Duchamp that was called "The Radical Artist Who Changed the Course of Art."
I believe that art is the only form of activity in which man shows himself to be a true individual.
Marcel Duchamp, he's the guy that put a urinal in an art gallery, caused a whole lot of outrage, and changed the course of art history. But that's just the famous bit. There's actually heaps more to this extraordinary artist.
Fundamentally, Duchamp was interested in changing your idea of the definition of the work of art.
Duchamp's whole life was an inspiring riot of artistic reinvention, a series of radical moves that left the art world struggling to keep up.
Duchamp never wanted to repeat himself. He never wanted to settle into a consistent taste because he believed that that was the death knell of true creativity.
Duchamp started early. By age 15, he was already a pretty good impressionist painter. By his 20s, he was associated with one of the most avant-garde movements of the time, the Cubists in Paris. But his paintings were too challenging even for them, particularly this one, his first provocative masterpiece, Nude Descending a Staircase.
So Nude Descending a Staircase #2, a painting of 1912, really is historically a kind of game changer. It attacked the sacrosanct subject of the nude of art and really revised it in ways that predict lots and lots of Duchamp's interests in his work to come afterwards.
The one the newspaper man called an explosion in a shingle factory.
Yes, yes. That was really a great line he put out.
Succès de scandale, now.
Succès de scandale, yes.
That was the one that caught the public's attention and made Duchamp famous in New York before he ever stepped foot there. So it became a kind of icon of the kind of art that Duchamp is remembered for, which is the kind of art that really challenges you to rethink everything.
So with that massive early success, he was on track to becoming a renowned painter, right? Not the case.
He decided that if he was going to simply keep working as a painter, he would get into a rut almost immediately and betray his own ideas about originality and experimentation, so he simply gave up painting and decided that he would pursue art under completely different terms.
So Duchamp went underground for a bit. He stepped away from art circles, got a job as a librarian, studied maths and physics, and then came back with his signature radical work.
His most recognizable innovation was the invention of the works he called ready-made, that is, ordinary mass-produced objects that Duchamp selected and did not make himself, and which he placed in art context in order to create new thoughts for them, as he said. The ready-mades were important because they really challenged the whole idea of originality and authorship and technical ability as essential parts of the artistic process. And the question then was, well, if those essential elements of art have been pushed aside, what is art?
So what does a groundbreaking, pivotal artist do next? He heads to Buenos Aires and plays a lot of chess.
He saw many connections between chess and art. Chess, for him, was essentially a highly cerebral kind of exercise, something involving the gray matter. And he thought that art should be oriented toward teasing the mind more than gratifying the eye.
Throughout Throughout the 1920s and 30s, he plays competitive chess and spirals into this focus on cerebral intellectual art, doing experiments with language and optics. But being Duschump, he finds a way to make it complicated.
He's making all sorts of new experiments under the partial cover of a female alter ego or pseudonym of Eros C'est la vie. He invented this persona to distance himself as a maker from his own work. And that was another way of challenging common sense ways of working as an artist and finding new ways of working.
By this point, I kind of see Duchamp as like this slippery fish that won't allow the art world to contain or categorise him. And he keeps this up until the very end. Duchamp publicly retires, but of course he has a secret room where for 20 years he develops ideas and does drawings for his final enigmatic masterpiece, which in true Duchamp fashion isn't revealed until after his death.
To say that Duchamp is one of the very most important artists in modern art in the West in the 20th century is an entirely uncontroversial claim these days. What makes him so attractive to artists who come later is really his iconoclasm, his willingness to disobey and disrespect the rules that have been inherited from the history of art. He said it more than once. The public he had in mind was not even the public of his own day, but really the public of 50 years later, that would look at his body of work as a whole and think about it in its own way. And I think it's very nice that we are 50 years after the end of Duchamp's career, and that makes us his ideal public.
So Marcel Duchamp did not only change the course of art, as you heard, but he had strong beliefs of what that course of art should be. He had strong beliefs that this art should look a certain way. He had strong beliefs that the art that was being displayed was leaving out what truly art is about, which is life. It was taking away the experience of people and how they should experience life. It was art that catered to a certain group of people. It was discriminatory art in a sense. It left out a large group of people. And this could be seen in our society. Not a lot of people have access to places like art galleries, and not a lot of people have access to art supplies where they can just sit and just share their art, or not only art in fine art terms, but music. Not all types of music reach everybody. There's certain music that can only be found on Spotify or YouTube. If I'm looking for Congolese music, I need to look for it on a digital platform that's worldly. But for somebody in a village somewhere with no internet, they have no access to that type of music. And this is where things like radios play very, very important roles in spreading art, making art accessible to all individuals, taking art to places where it was never going to be there, but allowing art to not be something that is of the bourgeoisie only, but something that is accessible to everybody. Because art is a part of our everyday life. Art ties up our existence and makes it beautiful. And that's what Marcel Duchamp and the rest of the Dadaism movement was trying to put across. To put across that art is not something that should be exclusive. It's something that should be shared. It's something that should be appreciated by many because it makes you feel. It shouldn't be something that you look at and you're just at peace, like, oh, okay, that's pretty. It should be something that questions you, something that should cause a revolution. A revolution not only in what art should look like, but it cause a revolution in politics, for example, during Dadaism, when they had art that was against war. It was at a time where war was such an important thing for European countries. It was a time where there was colonialism, there was the grab for Africa. Everybody wanted to be the big shot country that owns slaves, that owns countries outside of their own, and that owns too much territory. And Dadaism did what it was supposed to do by going against that. It was the type of art that said, this doesn't make sense, we can't own people. It was a type of of art that held their leaders accountable. And I think this type of art would be important in our society now. We look at our leaders, we look at our people that we have placed in power. Our artists should be vessels of holding those people accountable. Sometimes not everybody has the voice to speak up and say, we don't like this, do better in this aspect. But to have art be at the center of this, art be something that tags at the heart of those people, art that says, you're not doing this right, or art that commends our leaders for how great they're doing, art that reminds our leaders that they're doing a great job and we are proud of how well they represent us. That's what art should be. And that's what Dadaism was pushing. Dadaism was pushing for an art that says, we are here and we want to be heard, we want to be seen. And during Dadaism, there were musicians as well. Not only did Duschump create a fountain, a urinal, and make it something big, he caused earthquakes in the society of art. He shook the world simply for having a urinal. Imagine how much you would shake the world for having a radical opinion, for just thinking outside the box and calling someone accountable. I think as much as society has moved from this type of art, from what art was in 1917 to what art is now, we could still move to art that is holding people accountable, art that is inclusive of everybody. Like an example of Malawian art that was inclusive is an exhibition that Mike Ntika held at Galiso Art Gallery in 2022. It was an art exhibition on kabaza. Kabaza is something that a lot of Malawians use. It's a mode of transport that most Malawians have used at one point or another in their lives. And it gets to every part of the country. It's a mode of transport that is inclusive. It's not exclusive to a certain group of people. It's inclusive of everybody. It gets to the parts that cars can't get. It gets to the parts of Malawi that some of us may never even think of going to. And it was a reminder of how art sees everybody. Art sees all of us. In everything that we are, we all should be represented in art. And Dadaism had that type of energy towards art. It had musicians like Tristan Tzara. I hope I say his name right, Tristan Tzara. It's very difficult to pronounce European names. And the more I pronounce them, the more I understand why they struggle to pronounce African names. Tristan Tzara was a Dada movement musician. He had music that was on Discord. He had music that was not what you would expect music to be. Before we dive deeper into what his music was and what his beliefs were in Dadaism, let's sit back and listen to his song after we listen to his interview on what Dada is.
1920. Tristan Tzara brings Dada from Zurich to Paris, where he is awaited like a messiah.
La chanson Dada, musique de Georges Auric. La chanson d'un dadaïste qui n'était ni gai ni triste et aimait une bicycliste qui n'était ni gai ni triste. Mais l'époux le jour de l'an s'arrête tout et dans une crise en voyant au Vatican l'heure de corps en 3 valises. Ni amant ni cycliste n'était plus ni gai ni triste. Mangez de bon cerveau, lavez votre soldat. Dada, dada, buvez de l'eau.
I hope you enjoyed that song. And that song is interesting because which part of that made you feel like you were listening to music? What was the relation of that music to the music we listen to every day? The music we listen to is music that's orderly. We have music that has a verse, a chorus, a verse, a chorus, and then it ends. But music in Dadaism was music to say it doesn't need to be like this. I could start with a chorus and end with a verse, or I could sing a whole song without having a verse at all. or having like make the whole song just sound like one very long chorus, or have a whole song that's just one line. And I think certain music in our modern day times could fit very well into Dadaism. Music like Amapiano, for example. Amapiano is not very structured. It's structured according to its genre itself, but it also doesn't use words. When you listen to Amapiano, it's music that uses sound. It uses different types of sounds, chants, things that you don't listen to or hear every day, but it creates music and it makes you feel, which is the point of art. It continues to prove what the Dadaism movement was trying to get across, to say art should make you feel. That is the duty of art. Art should not be something that you just listen to and throw to the side, or music that you listen to and say, oh, that was nice, but music that you listen to and you feel it. Music that moves, you may be moving your body involuntarily. That's what music should do. That's what art should do. You look at a piece of artwork and you immediately are transformed and taken back to something that, a memory, for example, or something that you wish you could attach yourself to. You see a landscape and you're thinking, I wish I could go there. It reminds you of how much you want to travel and fuels you to work towards making that goal of you traveling. That's what art is. And I think Dadaism may have left out a certain part of written or art. As much as they were going against the idea of art that is aesthetic and art that is just pleasing to the eye, it should have been a thing they should have added, or in my opinion, they could have added written or art as in art that is beautiful, art that is just simply for aesthetics, because that also makes you feel, that also reminds you of what life should be, and that's also inclusive. Because if we're being inclusive with our art, it means we should not leave out the bourgeoisie. As much as we are against their beliefs of being the bourgeoisie, Dadaism was against capitalism. Capitalism in most cases has the rich, the poor. And then we push the idea that the harder you work, you might make it to the rich, but you might never do. It's all about opportunities, and not everybody gets served the exact same opportunities. So to leave out these people who are bourgeoisie because that's what they are, is to not acknowledge the fact that they also have their own lives. They also have certain things that led them to where they were. Maybe some, it was simply because of hard work. Some might have been because they had rich parents that allowed them to get there, but that does not take away from the fact that they are people that deserve to be given certain opportunities. They are human beings that deserve to be acknowledged for their stories. And Dadaism should have made a space for that, but even if it did not, it does not take away from how amazing the Dadaism movement was and how the amazing wonders it did for art. It redefined art completely. It allowed everything to become art, including yourself. It allowed you to become art, because art is everyday life, and that's what Dadaism was trying to push. Marcel Duschump, which is the artist that we wanted to look at today, the artist that we've been speaking about the most, said that Henri Matisse, as a retinal artist, was an artist that should be rejected. So Marcel Duchamp was not only an artist who went against what the norm was, but he was brave enough to call out these artists. Art allowed him to have a voice. He used his art as a voice to go against the things he did not believe in, the things he did not agree with, and he did that with no fear. That's what art should do. Art should be a space where you take away fear. You call out people for what they're doing, to allow conversation. Art should allow conversation. The fountain allowed the conversation and art to happen. The conversation to say, what are we doing as a society? Are we a society that wants to send our young men to war to die? Are we a society that wants to keep the rich staying rich and the poor getting poorer? Are we a society that wants to divide those who have and those who do not have, to stay that way and not allow an inclusive environment? Are we a society that wants to make aesthetics the center of our being and not really anything else? Are we a society that is rational? A society that uses logic? A society that believes in reason? And whose reason are we looking at? Is it the reason of those in power? Is it the reason of those who are older than us? Is it reason that comes from experience? Or is it reason that comes from somebody's assumptions? Who are we as a society? And that's what the fountain asked. Who are we as a society? Who are we as people? And I hope that's the question we keep asking ourselves. Who are we? What are we about? And as Malawian society, as the modern day society, who are we? What do we believe in? How inclusive are we? And how do we want to experience art? And how is that art supposed to change us to be better? I hope you enjoyed this program. Join me again next week as we will be discussing art and who we are. And like I said, the earth without art is just So let's keep talking about art and being art.